Welcome everyone to another edition of Drunk Agile. I caught Prateek mid-pour, hand in the cookie jar.
Yeah. Yeah, Glenn Gary,
Yeah,
58%. Yeah.
Blair Ethel. All right. So what we wanted, we're going to start off this episode with a Richard Feynman quote. I don't know. I wrote this down from somewhere, so I don't know. I can't validate the authenticity of this quote, and I cannot validate if it's like verbatim correct. But I think this is fair. If somebody else there has a better reference or whatever, would love to hear it. But and that actually kind of dovetails on what we're talking about tonight. But so this is a quote from Richard Feynman. It says, "The first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool." Thank you, Dr. Feynman. Prateek, what do you think? What do you think when you hear that?
What I mean, before getting to the general commentary on things we all believe in the agile space, what that really tells me is this thing that we keep talking about, you and I at least keep talking about as the definition of agile, of I want to find out as quickly as possible how wrong I am. That it sounds like that statement that we make is a derivative of this Feynman quote of by default, we should assume that we are fooling ourselves. Now let's go and prove that we are not fooling ourselves. The quicker we do that, the better off we will be.
Well, and so that's what we were talking about. Well, and yeah, we have to admit we're at least one whiskey in. Prateek might be further, but one of the things we were talking about before we started recording was this idea of it's not necessarily that you are. I mean, it is you are fooling yourself, but a lot of Agile, a lot of the bad stuff that gets perpetuated in Agile is that we allow other people to fool us. And so, we were coming up with our laundry list of all the junk that has been come to be associated with Agile. Things like story points, things like fixed length time boxes, things like in the lean flow world, things like expedites and cost of delay, right? I mean, there's everybody, and I'll just repeat myself. Everybody kind of parrots these techniques, these ideas, without really ever stopping to, number one, think critically about it, and number two, maybe going off and doing some research on, well, do expedites really make sense? Do story points really make sense? Do these things that we supposedly I'm supposed to do to be agile, do they really make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I firmly believe when people are first told of these things, they go, yeah, that makes intuitive sense. That just makes intuitive sense. But we never do not we never. Most of the time, people don't do the hard work of figuring out if that intuitive sense actually translates into real sense by doing the hard work, as you were saying, Dan, of of running the experiments, of gathering the data, of figuring out, of doing true science with this, to figuring out, hey, are we fooling ourselves? Is someone else fooling me? Are we really fooling ourselves? Because many of these things on face value make intuitive sense. But when you dig a little deeper, just a little bit deeper, they don't make that much sense.
And what's funny is a lot of times you don't even have to do that hard of work, right? You don't have to do that much research. Like take story points, for example. The guy or one of the guys who invented story points has on many occasions, publicly, very publicly, and in the written word and published, whatever, said, don't do it. Like he like actually apologized for his part in perpetuating this stuff. So you don't even have to look that hard to read some of this stuff.
Yeah, I when we started talking about, hey, let's do this for the next video, I didn't think I would get this triggered. But
that was one whiskey ago.
It's one whiskey ago. But it just things like story points, it just doesn't, I don't understand at all how if you just do a little bit of research, if you just do a little bit of playing around with the data. It's so easy to figure out that these are not things. In fact, these are these are not just things that are not useful, they're actually things that are harmful. And beyond that, this is the part where I get really triggered. Beyond that, even when people start seeing the proof that these are not useful, they start finding ways to defend this stuff. Instead of going, hey, okay, that's not useful, but then go, actually, it's the discussion that matters, not the estimate. Well, then don't call it estimation, call it something else. Yeah, of course, if we get the sprint goal done early, then we can just linger for the rest of the time box. Well, if you're truly talking about being lean and agile, well, pull the next goal in, start working on that. People start doing mental gymnastics when these proofs are put in front of them, which I am sure in the comments we will see some mental gymnastics to say, oh yeah, but that thing that I was told must be true. I have taught other people that. It's okay to recognize that you're fooling yourself.
But
And
Prateek, that's how we teach it. Prateek, that's how we teach it. Yeah.
that's been about 10 years now.
I
But
know.
anyway.
Yeah, that's sometime when you meet Prateek, go up to him and say, but Prateek, that's how we teach it. There's a whole story. There's a whole story behind that. But let's actually maybe kind of take that example, for, there is a lot of Kanban training out there that you will do that they will tell you not only are, say, like expedites, this idea of having an expedite class of service a good thing, but that you should design it into your process from the beginning, right?
Yeah.
Forget about studying and what's good for your process, but you have to design this thing in from the beginning. And I remember we got to get Frank on this call. We
Yeah, we do.
got to get him. But I remember it was Frank Vega who first approached me about the whole Little's Law thing, and he's like, Dan, have you ever even read anything about Little's Law? And I had to, this is back in 2008 2009, and I had to admit I never had. And so he sent me a couple of his papers, and the things, you don't even have to go and read the original proof of Little's Law. Little has published at least two very, very, very accessible papers that you can read, and you can kind of understand his thinking behind this. And immediately, I mean, he says it in black and white. Things like when you favor certain items over other items, when it affects the overall age of the whole system, that's a bad thing. That's from a predictability perspective, that's a really, really bad thing, and you shouldn't do it. So I guess maybe this is how I get triggered too, is this is how these things get perpetuated, because it makes sense. Well, Prateek, this thing's really, really important. So we probably should expedite this over the 102 other things that we're already working on, which, by the way, were all expedites when they started too.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's, I mean, there is two levels of evil here. First is forgivable, in my opinion. You heard something, you started doing it because, some expert came in and told you to do it. Cool, forgivable. The second level is you were shown proof that it doesn't work, and you still kept doing it. That is less forgivable. Actually, there's a third level, which is you were shown proof that it doesn't work and you kept teaching it. That is absolutely unforgivable. This stuff doesn't work, but you're only teaching it because, the curriculum you've been handed tells you to teach it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and even if we don't, I mean, depending on how many whiskeys you get into me, I would probably advocate for a much more scientifically rigorous approach to Agile. But even if you don't have that, and this is to me where the Feynman quote comes into its own, you kind of have to have that mindset, because the whole point of science is that you need to do everything you can to prove yourself wrong. Right? You have this hypothesis. Now you need to do whatever you can to prove yourself wrong. And this is what Prateek was saying, kind of right at the outset, is you have to go in assuming that you are wrong. And by the way, I think we've had several Drunk Agile episodes about this. It is much, much, much more likely that you are wrong than you are right. And that's the mindset we have to have. Yet when we perpetuate these things, we're making a fundamental assumption that, hey, we are right. This is correct. This is right. So
And this kind of takes me back about, I don't know how long ago it was, probably 8, 9 years ago, when we started talking about CD3 and we started kind of looking into it. And frankly, on surface, it makes sense. It makes sense. And if you read Don Ryerson, it makes a lot of sense. There are just certain conditions that need to exist for it to be true. And our uh, our first reaction was, how do we prove it? How do we prove that this makes sense or doesn't make sense? And I think we went into some sort of the seventh circle of simulation hell to pull in a whole bunch of simulations to kind of go, does it actually make sense? And then even encourage teams to try this stuff to see what makes sense and what doesn't. And um, in other words, we tried to do as many of the hard yards as possible to make that make sense. And at the end of the day, it didn't for us.
Well, for the record, and I know I always say this when this comes up, but for the record, we actually did prove Don Reinertson right.
Yep.
But in your point, in a very specific context, he's absolutely right. It's like, if you know certain things, then absolutely do CD3 or cost of delay.
Yep.
The thing is, in most of our worlds, you don't know those things, and so in those cases, as Prateek was saying, you're actually doing yourself harm. You think you're doing the right thing, but you're doing harm. And again, that requires some critical thinking. That requires some, like you said, hard yards. That requires some type of work to make sure that, hey, we're not just saying stuff just to make ourselves sound good.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we get paid money to deliver value to customers. And we should always be, as Dan said, using our critical thinking to figure out if this thing that we're doing, is it actually allowing us to efficiently, effectively, predictably deliver value to customers? If it's not, then we're kind of proving that it's unnecessary, and let's throw that thing out.
And if it is, great. Continue to do that. I don't care if it's Scrum. I don't care if it's Kanban. I don't care if it's safe. I don't care if it's working for you. Can continue to do that. But make sure when you're telling people about it that you're outlining, hey, these are the conditions under which this worked. These were the assumptions we were making. These are right. If I can't reproduce those same conditions, then you know what? I'm probably not going to have the same result. I don't know. I kind of stole the last word there, but I feel like you should have the last word.
I mean, I think we have dead this beat horse.
I think we have. So remember, the first principle is that you must not fool yourself, and you are the easiest person to fool. I mean, I think I can speak for Prateek when I say that I have been fooled by a lot of this stuff in Agile. I mean, I've made so many. Maybe we should do an episode on how many mistakes we've made over the years. I've made so many mistakes, which I guess is one of the reasons why I'm kind of passionate about this, because I'm hoping all of you out there don't necessarily have to make the same mistakes that I did. But I'll leave that. That's up for you. Whether you want to receive that message or not, that's completely up to you.
I was about to pull out my Who record, and I won't get fooled again.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm sure we will get fooled again. We will find. But yeah, regardless of what the Who says, we will get fooled again.
And that's Prateek not taking the last word. I think
Who.
That's fair. We've rambled on enough. Thanks, everybody. Those of you who stuck with us, thank you very much for this kind of wayward episode. Maybe we'll have a more structured one next week. Can't say that will necessarily be the truth.
Right.
But anyway, thank you so much for listening. We're glad to have you. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you have any questions or other thoughts, we'd love to hear from you. Until then, we will see you in the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Yeah.